Okay, we're live.
Hi, I'm Debbie Lucci from William Ravis, Andover, Massachusetts, and I'm here with some of my team members and a special guest. We have our team members, Diana Silva here with us, Mackenzie Cormier. We're located about 35 minutes north of Boston, and we have a special guest here today, Paul Sapienza. So we're going to talk about buying in this market, specifically first-time buyers. So Paul, can you tell us, a little bit about yourself, where you work, things like that?
Well, first, thanks for having me on, and I hope everybody's enjoying this beautiful day. I'm Paul Sapienza. I'm a longtime mortgage guy. I've been doing this since my first co-op in college. I don't want to say how old I am, but I've been doing this for over 25 years. And I've actually also been with my company, which is a rarity, at Drew Mortgage Associates for over 25 years. So I've been here for a long time, and I've been through a lot of ups and downs, but we're around, and had a very busy year last year with the refinances. And but did you want me to touch on a little bit on the first time buyers? Is that what you wanted? Or?
Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you?
Well, they can get in touch with me at my name is Paul Sapienza, so P Sapienza at drewmortgage.com. My last name is spelled Sapienza, P Sapienza at drewmortgage.com, and send me an email. I can give you my phone number also if you like, which is 617-523-3060, 617-523-3060. So thank you, Deb, on that. And call or email anytime. Been around for a long time. I'm a good resource of information, even if we don't do a mortgage, which is very helpful.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
So we have Diana and Mackenzie who work with a lot of buyers. I work with specifically more sellers. And we wanted to talk about, because Paul brought this up to Mackenzie. Mackenzie's worked with Paul on several occasions, and especially first-time buyers. How can you make the buyer look stronger? I mean, like we had a house last week that I put on the market. We got 13 offers on it. It was on the market for $499. Those buyers, the majority of them were 96, 95% financing. So, how can you make these buyers look more appealing, and tell us about it?
Well, what I like to do at my end is there's two different ways. Well, there's two different forms that lenders issue. One is a pre-approval, and one is an actual commitment letter. And the most popular one out there is the pre-approval, and the pre-approval does hold a lot of weight. It's actually talking with a licensed mortgage professional, pulling your credit, which is very important, and maybe most of the time having a verbal conversation on their income. Sometimes they might provide physical information, but the person is providing, you are checking their credit, you are having a conversation, and you most likely are reviewing some physical documentation. And the pre-approval does have a lot of weight behind it. But in this aggressive market we've been in today, I always try to tell my clients, let's get you a commitment letter, meaning the lender's committing to lend funds based upon this document. A pre-approval is not committing to lend funds. That's just a pre-approval based upon, again, your credit and some verbal or maybe some physical documentation. A commitment letter is an actual, you're applying for the loan and you're going to provide all the information that's needed, but we're just not going to have their property address in hand. And that loan's going to go physically in front of an underwriter. An underwriter is going to look at it and say, stamped, you're approved for a purchase price of $600,000 and a loan amount of $550,000. Here's your rate. Here are the conditions. And here it is. So that's a commitment. That's a commitment to lend money. And that holds a lot more weight than a pre-approval. I advise everybody to do that in the war, in the bidding wars out there today, in the seller's market.
Now, can you tell from that letter what it looks like? As a listing agent, will it say like commitment? Will it look any different?
That's a great question. It's going to say loan commitment, and on that it's going to have all the terms, for our client's name, the interest rate, the term, the loan to value. It might even have their qualifying ratio. Sometimes it has, some information on there. But what you're going to have on the loan commitment is prior to closing conditions and at closing conditions. So what you want to look at is the prior to closing conditions are going to be, finding a property, if there's PMI involved, appraisal, homeowners, general conditions up front that we just don't have yet. You can't have because we don't have the property yet. And if you see general conditions such as updated pay stub, updated bank statement, that's all template stuff. That's all good stuff. You just don't want to see an 800-pound gorilla condition like getting need to be employed. That's a problem. But what I'm saying is, if you get a commitment to lend funds, you've been seen by an underwriter, and that's stamped, and that's a gold bullion. That's a good thing to have.
And isn't it typically, it's longer than one page? Like the pre-approval is usually just one page, a singular page PDF, but the commitment letter, it's a little longer. I think you just sent one over to me a week or two ago.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, again, that pre-approval is not reviewed. I don't want to speak for all lenders. That pre-approval is most likely not reviewed by an underwriter. That pre-approval is reviewed by the licensed loan originator, and credit has been reviewed, maybe physical documentation. So it's a one-pager. The loan commitment, again, has the information page prior to closing conditions and at closing conditions. So you're going to see a formal commitment to lend money. So you're correct. It's a more formal document.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. How long does that commitment letter last?
That's a great question.
Approval?
Everybody always asks that. What happens is when you do a formal commitment letter, there are expiration on documents. So documents don't last forever, such as your credit report, such as pay stubs, bank statements. So you might always see lenders use credit reports are good for generally 4 months. So you always might see a few months down the road of an expiration date. And that's a great question. So if you have a commitment letter and the borrower is just not finding anything, you're right. You might have to update their credit, make sure everything's hunky-dory. They don't pop off to Vegas and lose all their money in the interim. Update the commitment letter. It takes a matter of minutes. Well, if everybody's busy, it could take a little bit longer. But so that's a great question.
So now, one of the things that I was really nervous about looking at these 13 offers the other day, it was the price point of the house that was really bringing this type of buyer in, where this is what they could afford, and they were financing 95 or 96.5%. At that price point too, if the buyer has the money to make up the difference for the appraisal, can they use that?
Of course. Well, what happens in the lender's eyes, the purchase price is either going to be the agreed upon purchase agreement or the lesser of the appraised value. Now, if an FHA loan can be a little bit confusing on that because it's an amendatory clause, but overall, if you have a purchase price for $500,000 and the appraisal comes in at $450,000, the purchase price in my eyes is $450,000. So the 3% down is going to come, or 3.5% is going to come down from the $450,000, and then someone's going to make up the delta. Your job to negotiate. The borrower doesn't have sufficient funds to make up the delta, then we're in a pickle. So you're right. I mean, so in my eyes, it's the appraised value always, the purchase price.
All right, so let's use those numbers exactly. Those are good numbers. So let's say, for example, we have an FHA loan.
Yeah.
They paid $500 for the house, but the appraisal came in for $450. How are you dealing with like the PMI and all this other stuff?
Do you know I just had this scenario out in Holden, Massachusetts? I have an FHA borrower, but they did have a couple more bucks. They did, but most FHA borrowers, as we know, the Federal Housing Administration, it's a variation of HUD. It's a government-backed program to help borrowers get into a home with less down, lower credit scores, etc. I'm going to try to make a long story short. In an FHA loan, you have an amendatory clause, whereas if the borrower can actually get out of a deal, no matter what really is in the body of the P&S, if the appraisal comes in less than the purchase price. So we had to do a little arm wrestling because the sellers didn't want the borrower to be an FHA borrower, and they didn't want to get involved with the amendatory clause.
All right, so what happens if the buyer crosses out the finance contingency, even though they're an FHA buyer, they cross out the finance contingency altogether?
Do you know I just had this scenario out in Holden, Massachusetts? I have an FHA borrower, Well, there's another duplicate disclosure with HUD, FHA, of an amendatory clause, which comes into the appraised value to protect the consumer. And it can get ambiguous. I'm not an attorney, but luckily my scenario, both parties worked it out. The amendatory clause stood, everybody signed it, listing, selling, buyers, sellers, everybody acknowledged it, and it went through, but with a lot of negotiation. On a regular conventional loan, not FHA. When I say conventional, the other acronyms, there's all acronyms in our business, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. There's no amendatory clause. It's just kind of the bar. If a borrower ever went in to a purchase on a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan, 20% down, good old fashioned 30-year fixed rate, they choose to waive the appraisal. Okay, that's fine. Sometimes, I'm going to get a little confusing now. Sometimes these two agencies, Fannie and Freddie, based upon zip code and data information, you get an appraisal waiver. So sometimes you're negotiating hard to waive this appraisal, and all of a sudden I come back and say, I don't need one anyways. So, but in the end, to kind of answer your question is, where do you get into this negotiation? It really depends on the buyer, if they have any extra cash, because someone has to make up a delta.
Right.
You can't if you can't come to terms.
What is that? What is the highest you can borrow for a conventional loan?
There's two tiers. It depends on the county, 548 and change, and then 724. So you're in Essex, Middlesex, Suffolk, Norfolk, really the most expensive, the higher price type towns.
Yeah.
548, 250.
But what percent?
Good.
What percent?
What do you mean percent?
Well, if I was buying a home for $500,000, I wanted to go for a conventional mortgage. What is the highest percent that I could borrow?
Okay, well, the
80, 90?
Oh, you could. Well, it's interesting, not to confuse, but it's always a good question to ask depending on where you have a client, and the purchase prices might not be that high. You can do zero down rural housing through the USDA, which I have that product, zero down, and that was an old USDA through the government to help spur up rural areas for activity. So I've done a couple in the last 8 months, and if you just give me the address, I can let you know. You could go online, and if that property qualifies in that area, there are income restrictions.
Right.
There are income restrictions, but there is a zero down product out there with a good old fashioned 30-year fix. There's no PMI, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But to get to your question, in Essex and regular counties and Middlesex, $500,000 purchase, you have a minimal down borrow, right? You're either going to go FHA, which is a minimum of 3.5% down, or Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, which is 3% down. And at my end as a professional, I'm going to try to find what's the best, cheapest way for my client to go. The loan amount can be up to, in most counties, 548, 250. 548, and that can change based upon FHA and the county. But overall, it's 548, 250 to get your best rate and your best terms. You can go over that, but that's called an agency jumbo loan, and some of these parameters change. I don't want to bore everybody here today, but overall, to answer your question, your best terms for a loan up to 548, 250 in most counties with minimal down.
Okay. Now, you were talking before we got on the show a little bit about, why really people, like especially sellers, shouldn't really worry so much about FHA loans, and what that person has to go through to get an FHA pre-approval.
Well, politically a little bit. I mean, the government loves FHA loans, and I seem to just get a lot more approvals under FHA than Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. But to answer your question is that sometimes when you have a borrower less than 20% down, they go through a more rigorous underwriting process, and they also need a second level approval, which is PMI, which is the private mortgage insurance. So you actually have a borrower in front of you that has truly really been through a little bit more for approval than a person putting 20% down. So I like to try to convey sometimes when I'm get called by real estate brokers and or sellers and or attorneys that when you have a commitment letter for less than 20% down, you've been underwritten by most, an underwriter or two underwriters. So it's a very strong borrower.
I'm mostly list property, so I'm really kind of in the favor of, the sellers as far as, see, I really kind of feel like, why is the seller taking the responsibilities for the buyer's financing?
Well, because they're accepting somebody who needs to borrow money to buy it, right? So,
Right, but,
right.
shouldn't you have your ducks in a row before you?
Oh, geez. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't. It's a great statement you made. I mean, for a buyer to be out there without a pre-approval or a commitment letter, you don't see that much at all anymore. Meaning that the market's been strong for so long that a buyer's broker, the first thing they're going to tell, like McKenzie can say, is that, have you talked to a mortgage professional? It's very difficult to be there in the marketplace today if you haven't. And so, yes, I completely agree with you that, as a listing broker and you're fielding all these offers, obviously you want the highest offer, right? But, you're going to look at what's in front of you, cash, not cash. And so you're right. I mean, a commitment letter with somebody putting down 20% or somebody that's cash. I mean, I know cash is king, but man, that 20% borrower ain't that bad.
No, and we've actually had, there's a couple scenarios I can give you. And this happened a long time ago, and it was with a certain bank that we won't name that's been tough to deal with. And what happened is, right the day before the commitment, they said to me that this borrower could not get the money from another country, and they backed away.
Well, let me just say that. Let me say this. I've been around for a long time, and I'm not going to say I'm perfect. And man, do I have scars on me from early on in this industry, right? So I've been doing this for a long time. And just like anybody else, when you do something, I put the cart before the horse on every single loan that I do. If it's a condo, I'm an expert in condo. I live in the city. I lived in all of New England and Florida, but I've been living in the city for a long time. You need to get condo information first, and then you go into the borrower, because that's, condos can be excluded on conventional financing right away. But more importantly is that when you speak to a client, you got to peel that onion. Funds to close is huge. Pulling their credit, understanding their credit, funds to close. Where's the money coming from? Is it a gift? Any large deposits in your account the last 60 days? Are you self-employed? If you're not self-employed, are you W-2? If you're W-2, do you receive commission? Do you receive bonus? There are so many things you have to ask. So to get back to what you said, Deb, is that, yes, nobody wants to hear from Paul Sapienza at Drew Mortgage Associates at the finish line saying, wait a minute. That happened to me a couple of times about 27 years ago, and it hasn't happened since. I don't ever want to be in that position again. So, yes, that's when you're dealing with somebody, you want to know. Look, I'm sure everybody you have on your show and all my lovely competitors, they're all smart, educated, hardworking people. But you really have to make sure you work with somebody who just puts their ducks in a row.
So
even with the closing attorney, they're very instrumental in this whole transaction, especially with representation. And they're great at condo docs and reviewing things. And so having a great team is paramount to help.
yeah, I like dealing local. Yeah. I like dealing local and having, my people that you can call and you'll know they'll get it to the finish line. So it is when you give out a commitment letter, which I think is great. I mean, I think that we should get to the point we almost go straight to PNS and have a commitment in our hands when we're accepting, right out of the gate instead of an offer. But what should the buyer not do before they close on this property that would hurt them closing?
You have great questions, Steph. I tell my clients when they apply for a loan, only buy food to survive. Don't do anything else. Don't get a credit card. You know what I mean? If you have to go to Target, pay cash. I don't want you to get, oh, I got this credit card at Target. They were giving me 10% off. But that's a great question. You know, if it's a life necessity, you know, call me. But please, for 60 days, for 45 days, you know, just go to Star Market and don't do anything else. So I don't like people to touch their credit. You know, well, go to Jamula's, a little bit cheaper. Go to Market Basket. I'm like being funny.
Lucci's.
What was that?
Lucci's
Where's Luch? Oh, what?
in Wilmington.
Excuse me?
In Wilmington.
Oh, geez, I don't know where Lucci's is. I listen. I pay through the nose here in the North End. I can't say the name of the market, but it's convenience, and I pay through the nose. But anyway, you asked a great question, and you want to know what? At your end, it's a great thing to tell those consumers also. There's nothing wrong with you saying what I'm going to tell them, just reiterate it. Because what happens is, although the credit report's good for 4 months, and we're not going to re-pull their score, that's a good thing. But what all lenders are going to do is they do what's called, it's like an increase, called an LQI. And what we want to make sure is that they didn't tap out their credit cards or get any new credit. We're not getting a new credit score within 4 months. The rate's locked. They're approved on that score. But we do an LQI prior to closing. And if anything has happened in the interim, they have to explain it. And I don't want to have to explain anything. I want the loan to close. Then
Me
go
too.
do whatever you got to do.
Yeah.
I'll go do what you gotta
What happens, Paul, if they, I just had this happen and everything worked out, luckily, but like, you know, in the future, say it doesn't. What happens if they get another job in the interim of like before closing and stuff?
Yeah, that's a great questions. I mean, these are all just great questions. So again, when you're working with your mortgage professional, you hope that they have all these questions down and that they're taking care of all this for your clients.
Mhm.
But if somebody leaves Raytheon to go work for another W-2 company at the same salary, you know, just do the sign of the cross. We're going to be okay, right? But when you get the call from somebody that says, well, Paul, you know, I've been selling widgets for Raytheon for 30 years and I just went on my own. I got a bunch of clients. I'm all set. Don't worry about it. I'm pretty much going to make the same amount. I'm like, no, it's not going to. So
Right.
the answer to your question is, you are right. Anything changing from the time you start to finish, employment, listen, we hope nobody gets laid off. We hope nobody gets sick. We all hope all the good stuff. But my same questions that I ask all my clients is, are you looking for a new job? Do you have an offer for a new job? Is it in the same field? Is it commission? Is it bonus? Is it salary? Great question. You know what? Maybe even up front, I don't know what your regulations are at your end, but maybe asking the same, not asking how much they make and stuff, but
Right.
their stability and employment, very important up front.
Right. So it sounds like if, as long as they stay in kind of the same industry, don't go working for themselves, then they should be okay.
They should be okay. I mean, you know, the same field is important.
Yep.
You know, but if you get if you have confirmation of employment, first paycheck, taxes are taken out, base salary, we're pretty much going to be okay.
Okay.
That's a good question. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
Paul, I have a question. So we've been seeing a lot of cash, and when you have a strong buyer, and let's say we have this commitment letter, is it, you know, can they be thought of as like on an equal level playing field?
You got cut off just for a second. Are you saying a borrower has a commitment letter?
Yeah.
And a borrower that you just say cash? Are you trying to?
Yeah. Like, should the commitment letter kind of bring them up to that level to say that they could almost be looked at like as?
Yes, well, you know, I might be a little bit biased. I mean, I'm in the lending field, but I know because I was an underwriter for years. I've done everything in this business. I've done everything with a mortgage you can possibly do. But when an underwriter reviews that file, there's one thing that they don't have in front of them. That, to answer your question, is that they are credit-wise. Well, let's put it this way: a cash buyer, unless they want to have an appraisal done on their own, independent, there's not going to be anything running from the wiser. There's no appraisal done. Somebody that has a commitment letter, their money's just as green, but they might need an appraisal. You're never going to get an appraisal waiver on a jumbo loan. You're never going to get an appraisal waiver on a jumbo loan. So, answering your question, they're very strong. But let's say you need somebody that needs to borrow. Let's say there's a purchase price for $2 million. Person's borrowing $1 million. They're putting 50% down, but there's going to be an appraisal needed. A person buying cash for $2 million, well, they're not going to probably have an appraisal done. So the questions you're asking me, who's stronger? I wouldn't say a person's any stronger creditworthiness. Actually, the person who's borrowing $1 million has proven more. They can borrow $1 million. But so to answer your question, is the collateral side of things maybe a bit stronger on the cash person because, on your end of things, because there's just not going to be an appraisal needed.
It's funny. I had an offer and it was cash, and that buyer backed out right before they signed the purchase and sale. So a lot of it depends, I think sometimes too, what's going on in the stock market. And if they realize, that this could be costing them more than they thought it was going to cost them. So I don't know, sometimes the cash buyers are just as shaky.
Well, I just had a client down in Marco Island, Florida, which Florida is different. It's a very hot state right now. And had a lot of money buying a Marco Island for about $1.5 million. Excuse me. And went through the whole process, and her appraisal came in like at 1.3. And everybody's shooting for the stars in Florida because it's a crazy state. All sellers are shooting for the stars. And in the end, very creditworthy, could have almost paid cash, but she just wanted to finance it. This client happened just to walk away. She said, you know what? I'm just not going to get involved in this right now. So, you're kind of answering your statement or your question is you don't know sometimes with borrowers, could have still made the transaction happen. That's just how this person felt,
So, it's funny too. I think the girls the agents have encountered a little bit the difference between a really good mortgage broker and a not so good mortgage broker. So maybe we could tell us a little bit of stories sometimes about, Mackenzie, I know you've gone through some stuff where, you've had very different types of mortgage brokers and the effect it's had on the transaction.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's hard too, when you work with a new buyer that comes in already working with a different mortgage broker, you don't want to, overstep and say, I have somebody that would be great, especially if you haven't worked with that mortgage broker before. Different story if you have and know that it was a bad experience and the loan going to go through or something like that. But I think you have to really get your buyer to trust you. And I think sometimes it takes them losing out on a deal or two to understand that every single person that they have working essentially, with them and for them is just equally as important. It can't be just one person that's really good at something. And I think everyone has to have the same level of care and determination as well. I have buyers that now are over with Paul. And, I had a little bit of trouble trying to get them to move over from, their previous mortgage broker. And once I did and had a conversation with Paul, they said, thank you so much. Like, we really appreciate it. He taught us so many things that we were not even aware of just within one conversation. And so, because on my end, I'm assuming that this mortgage broker is having these conversations with the buyer and making sure that when we're submitting an offer that they understand what a waived appraisal means and, that they get all of these terms, and they didn't. But now they're over with Paul and we have a commitment letter. So I think that we'll have much better luck now. But it definitely matters who you work with and in every part, not even just the loan.
I totally agree on that. I think it comes down to also, I can't explain a loan like Paul can explain a loan. I can talk about real estate, what I see in the market, things like that, but that's kind of my area. But you need a good mortgage broker, definitely, who's seasoned, especially to explain it to first-time buyers because they have no idea what's going on, You girls have any other questions? You want to talk about anything else?
On my end?
On your end, yeah. That's great.
I can't say enough for people that, I'm going to say a couple of things my grandmother told me a long time ago. My grandmother said, my nickname's PJ. She said, PJ, she helped me buy my first property with money. And she said, PJ, don't ever let a $5,000 or a $10,000 bill get in the way of buying a property. And you know what? That rings true today. And it's so true. And also, I can't emphasize enough that people need to get pre-committed, get a commitment letter in this marketplace. I wouldn't even fool around. I mean, you can get a pre-approval, but if you're serious, like you want to engage a broker and you want to spend a lot of time looking at properties, I mean, you really just need to have a commitment letter. I mean, in the end, why settle for anything less if you're a serious buyer?
Right. So you think about it, if you're walking in that door, even if you're a first time buyer and you're not, that big cash buyer that's coming in there. I mean, if you walk in and you have the right attorney who, we were talking to Bill Dalton a little bit about this. We have several really great attorneys that we work with. But if you go right in that door and you've got a purchase and sale in your hand, you've got a commitment in your hand, and you're walking in there, and then everybody else is doing the same thing, writing down, either a waived home inspection or they're doing it in 7 days. Everybody, when you look at like the 13 offers I had, it's almost like each agent is cheating off each other because everything is almost the same.
Yeah.
So if you kind of walk in with that something a little bit different that makes you look a little bit stronger, better than anybody else in this market,
Well, I mean, a good reputable lender should do it. Maybe some lenders might not because it's a little bit more legwork, but hey, you got to change with the times, and it's basically needed. I would feel bad to not, my clients call me all the time too and say, Paul, what else can you do for me? Sometimes it's not much more after the commitment and writing a letter. I mean, giving up your firstborn to get the property. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know. Go to church, say a prayer. I don't know. But you just do the best we can at my end, do the best you can at your end. And so, you know what? My old adage is, I've always liked this one. The harder you work, the luckier you get. So you know what? Work hard. And I tell all my loan officers that work for me, I say, look, they think they're doing well. They made a lot of money during the refi boom. I said, you're not successful until you don't have to return anybody's phone calls anymore. So if you still have to return people's phone calls, they say, yeah. I said, you're not successful yet. So get to work, return your clients' calls, and work hard. So that's what I say.
Do you have any questions?
I have one last question.
Yeah.
I want to talk about waiving financing quickly, which I know you don't like, don't advise. But how, as a buyer's agent, and I work with both buyers and sellers, so I know on the listing side, when you get something that's waived, it's attractive. But on the buy side, how do you compete against that if your buyer just is not in a position where they can waive? Like if you have the commitment letter, shouldn't that then put them in a position where essentially they can waive the financing because they've already been approved for the loan?
You ask a great question, okay? And I should have been a lot of things in life. I should have been a therapist, a doctor, an attorney, but I'm a mortgage guy, okay? So this is what I say. There's a lot of pressure on the mortgage person, okay? So you got a 20% down borrower. They have to have this property. They want to waive the financing. Well, what I say to my client is this: what if you get laid off? What if you get sick? What if? So, I tell my clients I don't like to do it. Sometimes I just won't do it. And the market has been so aggressive. People are doing a lot of crazy things. And Mackenzie, I have to answer your question again live on Facebook is, I say no. If they can't pay cash or they can't ring mommy and daddy's phone and say, I lost my job, I need an extra $600,000, or I'm going to lose $75,000, that's a tough spot.
So then people are waiving it, and then it's like you're not competitive anymore, and they look right over your offer.
So if we have a commitment letter and let's say we don't waive the financing, how can we, get the point across to the listing agent that just because they're not waiving it doesn't mean that there's not, it's not going to go through. Like, how can we make our buyer look stronger and win against something that's cash or waived financing contingencies?
I think you have to really point out that letter to that listing agent, because
Yeah.
like I know when I was sitting here the other day looking at these 13 offers, I like very quick answers from the buyer's agent. I don't like a big, long thing. And if you just point it out to them and say, look, this is a commitment letter. This is not a pre-approval. That would help. But I know, like with my sellers, and I've talked to the agents about when they go to do things with their sellers and buyers, we have to present them options and say, look, this could happen, but ultimately, like, we kind of let them make the decision of.
You know who else? It just, in the end, it comes down to the borrower's decision to waive a commitment. But also, they're going to have an attorney, and what's the attorney going to advise them to do? So it's not just me. They're going to have an attorney, and that's a big decision. I don't know. You're asking Mackenzie. I'm going to stand on the fact of I'd like to wake up every morning knowing, I didn't advise somebody to possibly lose a lot of money in that case, if it, God forbid.
Right. I mean, we do the same thing with home inspections. We don't say, you should cross it out. We say, look, these are some of your options. You can do.
You're right.
Right.
But you're right. Home inspections are waived a lot. I think what Mackenzie's saying is that, people do it, and lenders will a lender. Yeah, I can't deny anybody to apply for a loan. I can't. Anybody that comes to me to apply for a loan, I have to take their application. That's my oath in this business. I have to. And if they say, "Oh, Paul, I'm waiving my mortgage commitment," well, I might have to have my attorney draw up something that I'm not liable. I haven't put myself in that position yet.
Yeah. They have to totally understand the risks.
Totally understand.
They have to totally understand.
You got 40, 50, 60 days of life happening. And life sometimes isn't easy. And things happen. And I don't want to be at fault. So I guess Mackenzie did preface my position on that. I guess, man, that's a tough one.
I think the good thing is that by having the commitment letter, you can really show the listing agent that, you can close much quicker and you've done the work already.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I was getting off track. Absolutely. The commitment to lend is there. It's been approved. So that's correct. You can present yourself just as strong with those other cash buyers. You're just as powerful. The money's there. You just got to find a property.
Yeah.
Because there's no property on a pre-commitment.
All right. I think, anybody else have any more questions? Okay. I think we're at the end of our time. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. That was great. That was a lot of questions answered, and we really appreciate it. It's really funny because
thank you. That was nice of you guys. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. There's a lot of people that view this. I hear this from my customers all the time. So we do help them answer questions, and also other agents and things like that. So I enjoy doing it. So thank you so much, Paul. And thank you so much for helping us.
Great. Thank you.
All right. We had a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.